Well, Ken, it looks like we have a question already, so something to keep in mind as you're doing your presentation. Somebody wants to know about barometric pressure, what it is, and when does it change before thunderstorms and the impact on people.
I'm going to be talking a little bit about that.
Thank you. Okay, we do have another question, and just to let everybody know, we've not really started the webinar at this point, but I will let Ken know about your question. Basically, he wants to know why robins sing before the rain, because his dad said it was because they knew it would bring the worms.
I already see another webinar being set up here.
Jeanette, I do apologize. I do see your message about your gender.
Well, your daughter's online, Ken. She said to tell you hi.
My
No,
daughter?
your son. Your
my
son. I'm
son.
sorry, Justin.
My
Sorry.
son, Justin. Hi, Justin.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. For those of you just joining us, we will be starting in another minute. Okay. All right. Well, Sandy, I have 101. If you'd like, we can get started.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. I have started the recording for today's event. It will be available in a few days and viewed at www.youtube.com/@AARPNH1. Thank you for joining our program today. My name is Sandy, and I am your host for our presentation on weather wisdom and introduction. I am also a volunteer with AARP New Hampshire. Working with me are my fellow volunteers, Mary Ann Francis and Ashley Davis, the Associate State Director of Outreach and Advocacy. We welcome your questions and comments and ask that you put them in the chat box. Francis and Ashley will be monitoring the chat box and will mention your questions and comments throughout our program. although we'll address them at the end. AARP has been promoting the health and well-being of older Americans for over 60 years. In New Hampshire, AARP serves as a trusted resource for our members and the public with informative, innovative, and fun virtual events as a means of connection and inclusion. AARP has numerous resources on its website, and there is something for everyone. I will put a link in the chat. Weather is a topic everyone talks about. In our presentation today, we will learn how the different types of weather make you feel and how and why people interpret and react to weather forecasts. Our presenter is Ken Heidemann. He is the AARP Speakers Bureau volunteer trainer, and he holds a master's degree in meteorology. Ken spent most of his career as director of publications and senior editor for the American Meteorological Society in Boston. He is past president of the Council of Science Editors. Ken is the author of a recently published humorous book about cats. He has two of them, one of which is named Stormy, of course. He currently lives in Nashua, New Hampshire. Okay, Ken.
Well, all right. Thank you for that introduction, Sandy. I want to also I want to thank a few other people. I want to thank Mary Roberge, all these people from AARP, Cheryl Sweet, Ashley Davis, whose idea this actually was Ashley's idea. Sandy, I mentioned Sandy, also Francis Donahue, and I hope I'm not forgetting anybody else. If I am, thank you to whoever you are. I really appreciate it. I want to welcome everybody to this webinar, which is on, I call it Weather Wisdom. And I want to thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon. I really appreciate that. I think the first thing I want to say is what this talk is not about. And that is, it's not about nuclear physics or rocket science or brain surgery, nothing esoteric like that. It's about the weather, which is something we can all relate to. And when I say weather, I'm not talking about cold fronts and warm fronts and high and low pressure and the jet stream. I'm talking about the weather in broad strokes, in the many ways in which weather intertwines with our lives that we may not think about on a regular basis. So there's a quote I like to start with, and where is the quote? There it is. A little bit out of order there. Weather is your mood and climate is your personality. And that quote is from a gentleman named J. Marshall Shepard. He's the director of atmospheric science, the Atmospheric Science Department, University of Georgia, and also the former president of the American Meteorological Society. I had the privilege of working with him at AMS. And what he's saying there is that weather is like our moods, kind of ephemeral and always changing, whereas climate is something that's relatively it's like our personality, which is relatively more stable than our moods are. And for this webinar, I'm going to be concentrating on the mood part of this. So on the day-to-day weather part of this. And another way to look at this is, we all know what music is, but a lot of people want to get sort of below the surface and they want to be able to enjoy music on another level. So they might take a music appreciation course. There are many of those available. Well, we all know about weather too, but some folks, I hope like all of you, want to get under the surface a little bit. And this would be a weather appreciation class, if you will. That's sort of the, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. People are asking if you could do full screen on your presentation.
Let's see, I hope I do that right. Did I?
I think that's fine.
There's a way to make it larger, Ken. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's like a little slider bar right next to it, I believe is the slideshow button. So not the slider, but if you
Mhm.
go over to the button right next to it,
On the right
there's
or
like
left?
a little presentation. Yep,
Right.
that
Yep,
one.
right there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Looks
All
great.
Thank
right,
you.
great. So
Sorry.
again, this is like music appreciation, but it's weather appreciation. And so what I hope that you walk away with is uh, kind of a greater appreciation for, how weather impacts your life. Uh, and both personally, and then also I'm going to talk collectively as well in terms of all of humanity. And I want to put up the roadmap, if you will, of the talk. And I'm going to go in the other direction here. And I'm going to talk about first about what got me into weather in the first place and why I'm a weather nut. And then I'm going to call it the 5 Ps. It just turned out to be the 5 Ps, the way it was accidental. But these are aspects of weather I want to talk about. The sort of the practical aspects of weather and weather forecasts, how weather affects us physically, and then how weather affects us psychologically. And there's a lot of exciting research about that. And there's something I'm calling primal, which is kind of like the flight or fight survival thing when you get into some of the more dangerous weather hazards. We're going to talk about that. And at the end, basically, people, uh, how weather can unite people all over the world. And then we'll go to a quick summary and then a question and answer period, and not just questions, but comments as well. So that's kind of the order of things. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to start with me. How did this all start for me? And it was The Wizard of Oz. I was 4 years old. The tornado scene. And I will admit that I was scared of the vicious trees throwing apples at Dorothy and the lion and the Tin Man, and also afraid of the flying monkeys. I wasn't afraid of the tornado. I was instantly transfixed and mesmerized. And, if it wasn't that, it was going to be something else. It's just, fate, I guess, that this is a passion that was ignited. It happened to be ignited by the Wizard of Oz. So I was also very lucky that in succeeding years, family and teachers and friends supported and encouraged my interest in this. And weather actually became part of my identity. So that helped a lot. Now, as I got into high school, I realized that a large part of meteorology involved physics and calculus at a very high level. These were topics that if I worked really hard at, I could succeed in, but they weren't topics that I particularly loved. And but that was the way that was the reality. That is the reality of the situation with meteorology. And so at one point, considering that, I questioned my goal of becoming a meteorologist, whether I should or I shouldn't. And for that questioning didn't last long. My undergraduate degree is from the University of Vermont in Burlington, Vermont, and my master's is in meteorology from Penn State University. I am not what you'd call a prototypical scientist. If I went with my kind of academic strengths, I would have gone into psychology or literature or writing. But the force of this weather passion was unstoppable. So after a stint as a research meteorologist in Boulder, Colorado, and as a civilian in the Air Force in Massachusetts, I got my big break, if you will, by becoming the director of publications at the American Meteorological Society in Boston in 1998, and was there for 24 years. A friend and a colleague recently asked me what I think is a great question. uh, he asked me, what exactly is this passion you have for the weather? And I never really stopped to think about that. And uh, it kind of hit me in thinking about that, that as with any passion, part of it can't be articulated. You know, it just is. And but there are certain things I can point to and tell you why I'm passionate about the weather. Uh, One of them is that weather affects everyone. And I always thought that that was very cool. The atmosphere doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about your political affiliation or how rich you are. It's the great equalizer. That's what I like to call it. Also, everybody talks about it, needs to know how it is now and what it will be. And I love communicating that information to as many people as possible, like I'm doing right now. I love talking about the weather. And I have had the opportunity over the course of my career to go into schools, lots and lots and lots of schools, um, uh, kids of all ages. You'd say from school kids up all the way up through seniors as well, any age. I love talking to kids, especially. I say that kids and weather go together, and I believe that to be true. Um, it's Weather's forever changing. That is fascinating to me. You can't get bored following the weather because it changes all the time, especially I'm not sure what part of the country all of you are in. I'm in New England, and they say if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, and that's pretty accurate. Uh, it's there for the viewing all the time. It's like a free show in the sky every day. The only thing is you have to look up to see it. Most people spend most of their time outside, and I'd include myself in that, either looking forward or looking down. I suggest that if you don't do it already, occasionally look up because you've got a beautiful show every day, all kinds of clouds, and uh, just just treat yourself to looking up. It's very easy to do, but a lot of us don't do it. We're very distracted with our other thoughts. Storms thrill me. They always have. There's also a funny side to weather and to being a meteorologist. Uh, I get a lot of times when people meet me and they find out that I'm a meteorologist, the first thing they'll say is, boy, I wish I had a job where I could be wrong half the time and still get paid. And they think that they're the only person who's ever said that to me. And it's the five ever said it to me, and I laugh. Uh, and sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, wow, weatherman! I've never met a live one." I'm not sure what another kind would be, but that's something else I get. Uh, there's a lot of blooper reels. I don't know if you watch blooper reels about mistakes that are made in production of TV shows and news programs. Uh, a disproportionate number of those bloopers are from the meteorologists on TV or the weather presenters. If you go look at some of these from news stations, you'll see what I mean. There's a time recently that I drove my car to get through a toll and on the road, and I went into a lane to pay the toll, and I rolled my window down, and the lady inside said to me, "Oh, if it isn't the weatherman." And I was incredulous. I said, "Is it written on my forehead? I mean, how do you know that?" And she said, "Oh, it's your license plate. My license plate is weather." So I'd forgotten that. So there's that. There's also, and I don't mean to say this is funny because I'll tell you in a second. When there is an earthquake, a lot of times people who know me and know that I'm a meteorologist will say, "Wow, this you need to please tell me about this earthquake. I mean, you know all about this kind of thing. Uh, and that aspect is a little funny that they think that there's a sort of connection there. Earthquakes are not funny. Just the other day, there were a couple of earthquakes in Venezuela, very serious earthquakes. The same day there was an earthquake that was magnitude 7.2, which is very strong. The same day there was a 5.4 earthquake in California. So I know a little bit about earthquakes because I'm interested in nature in general, but our training does not involve seismology or that kind of a thing. But again, getting back to the sort of serious nature of my passion for weather, um, one of the things is the power of weather to bring people together. And I'm going to be coming back to that theme quite a bit. And then ultimately, you know, weather forecasts of you know, for outdoor events and outdoor plans and all that kind of thing. Those are important things. But in my mind, in the final analysis, meteorology is or should be about saving lives. That's what it's all about, and that's a major passion of mine. Now, I can't tell you. I don't think I've ever saved a person's life with the weather forecast. I'd like to think I did, but I don't think I did. I have. But that is really the ultimate purpose of meteorology is to try to mitigate hazards associated with weather and in the final analysis to reduce fatalities and injuries associated with the weather. So that's personal. Now let's start with practical and what I mean by that. Practical is how we use weather information every day. And I'd ask, what is one of the first things we do every day when we wake up? And I bet you that you check on a weather app or Google, or you turn on the radio or TV to hear what the weather is now and what it will be for the rest of the day and for the next few days. That's one of the things that we do. And there's very practical reasons for doing this. You know, the current and anticipated weather conditions will dictate what kind of clothes you want to wear. Do you want to wear a short sleeve shirt, cotton shirt, flannel shirt? Got to make that kind of decision. What about the kind of jacket or coat you're going to put on if you need one at all? Going to put on a light jacket or a heavy coat? How about gloves and a hat? Do you want to take do you want to put gloves on, take a hat with you? Are you going to need an umbrella? Nobody wants to take an umbrella with them if they don't have to. My own experience is the best way for me to suppress precipitation is to bring an umbrella. And the best way to encourage precipitation is for me not to bring an umbrella. But that's just me. What about sunscreen? Good medical advice is you should wear sunscreen every day, no matter what. But if it's really going to be sunny, you want to get that high SPF on. What about footing? Some of us have trouble getting around, and you want to know what it's like underfoot. Is there slush or ice or that kind of a thing? Do you want to wear dress shoes or sneakers or boots? All these decisions that you may not think you make based on what the weather forecast is, but you do. Do you want to walk 5 blocks to the bus stop, or would it be better or more comfortable for you to drive into work or wherever you're going today? And if you drive, will there be any impediments to that? You know, like fog or sleet or ice or that kind of a thing. Are you planning on catching a flight? You want to know if there's going to be a delay of some kind due to the weather, or might your flight even be canceled because of the weather? What about that golf game you have planned for next Tuesday, or the baseball game that you want to go to Wednesday night? Is it going to rain on your parade? You want to know that too. You want to know the probability of precipitation as an aside, do you know how to interpret the probability of precipitation? That's could be for another webinar down the road, that kind of thing. But that really, that is the weather. It's everywhere, and it gets into everything we do. And checking out the forecast is something that we do automatically. But most of the time, our dependence on weather doesn't necessarily rise to our conscious level. So what about the physical impacts of weather, the weather on our physical beings? One of the things that it can make worse is migraines. Anybody who has migraines knows that when the barometric pressure, which is the weight of the atmosphere that presses down on all of us, is reduced, the arteries and tissues in your head expand, and your skull has only a fixed amount of space in it, and that's going to make any kind of headache a lot worse than it would be otherwise. Another thing would be pain associated with arthritis or an injury of some kind for the same reason, that there's expansion of the bones, the joints, and the tissue around them that can kick up when the pressure is lower, and that means when storms are coming. High temperatures can lead to dehydration. Cold temperatures can lead to stiffness and muscle tension in your shoulders and neck. That can also exacerbate migraines, as can like leaving your warm house in the middle of the winter and immediately going out into the freezing cold. These are things that can also affect your migraines as well, and can be a trigger for a migraine attack. Bright sunlight can also be a trigger. So one thing you can do is track the weather and see if you find a correlation between certain weather conditions and a migraine attack or an aggravation of joint pain, that kind of a thing. And if you can find a correlation, then you might be able to take preemptive action to get ahead of the pain if those conditions develop or are forecast to occur. For example, I'm very blessed. I don't have migraines, but I'm told that for people that do, you want to get into a dark and quiet room if you have an attack. Well, one thing you can do, knowing that there might be a correlation with the weather, is if you hear there's going to be a storm approaching, the pressure's lowering, you might want to get to that quiet room ahead of time.
Excuse me, Ken.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you have just a few slides, but a couple of people are wondering if you could move, if the slides need to be moved.
How do you mean?
We're still looking at the roadmap, your first slide.
Right. What I should say is that I have very few slides today. I didn't want to have a lot of fancy charts and that kind of thing. This is mostly a conversation. So I have a few slides here, and so you're going to see some of them are going to be on for a while. So that's why this is fixed.
Thank you, and my apologies to everyone. It's just that we've had a number of people ask, so I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I should have mentioned that ahead of time. So you can get ahead of the pain by going to the quiet room. You can start anti-inflammatory medication before you might otherwise have done so. I personally I broke my arm in graduate school very badly, my left arm, and that starts to ache before it starts to rain. So a silver lining, if you will, is that your injury or your condition might help you forecast the weather as well or better than some meteorologists in certain conditions. Pollen can be a miserable thing. This has been a bad year for that, at least up here, but I know it has been in other places as well. Warm and windy weather maximizes the spread of pollen and the release of pollen. Rain can help reduce that over the short term. Another thing is that heat extremes and poor air quality can aggravate chronic cardiovascular and pulmonary problems, as well as problems associated with diabetes. So they can also, excessive heat obviously can lead to serious conditions like heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And we're going to talk more about heat in a little bit. Very cold air can aggravate pulmonary problems. Also, arthritis can be a lot worse in the cold weather. And if you're taking medication, extreme warm or cold temperatures can affect how well your medications work. So you should be aware of that. Thunderstorms can make weirdos like me feel excited and alive, but for many normal people, they can cause sleepiness and tiredness because of falling barometric pressure and the reduced atmospheric oxygen associated with thunderstorms, and also the environmental cues in a situation like that. You've got clouds and darkness, and that can also make you feel tired. There is a myth that a lot of people think that going out into cold air or cold, damp air will give you the flu or a cold. No, those conditions, weather can't give you the flu, but they can make you more susceptible to the flu if you're exposed to it. So that's a bit of a subtle difference. But I know that my grandmother always used to tell me, "Oh, don't go out today. You're gonna catch a cold." Well, sometimes I'm sure I did, but sometimes I did not. So the next thing here on our roadmap is the psychological aspects of weather. This is something that really fascinates me, and I've got a lot to say about that. As Marshall Shepard said in the opening quote, "Weather is your mood, and it can profoundly affect your mood and emotions." So, for example, and it can go both ways. It can make you happy or sad or irritable. So, if I could ask all of you and have you answer, I would ask you, what temperature makes you feel the best? What is your favorite temperature? And my ideal temperature is 70 degrees. But some of you, like my daughter, would say 85 degrees. Others who love winter might say 30 degrees, or it could be 60 or 80 or anywhere on the spectrum at all. One size doesn't fit all that way. But if you are in your sort of ideal temperature range, I think that's going to give you a bit of a boost. You feel more comfortable in your skin at your favorite temperature. Now, if it was clear and sunny 5 days in a row, some of you, maybe most of you, would be ecstatic, would love that. For me personally, I'd be miserable. I need to see some clouds, have occasional overcast days, and have rain every 4, 5, 6 days. Otherwise, that makes me feel down if I don't have it. Whereas for a lot of people, if those things exist, then they feel down because of that. I was in Kansas a few years ago on business and listening to a weather program on TV. And the TV meteorologist said something like, after it had rained for 4 or 5 days in a row, said, the lousy weather is finally going to give way to sunshine. The problem is that farmers, who are probably also listening to the same broadcast, wouldn't have classified a few rainy days as lousy because their crops need water to grow. That's their livelihood. So you got to be careful assuming what is quote unquote good weather and what is bad weather. One person's great weather is another person's bad weather. Day-to-day weather directly affects the amount of light that gets through the atmosphere and to us. For example, cloudy and gloomy weather results in a decrease of natural light. And if you extend that from a few days over a few months, you can run into something called seasonal affective disorder, and that can result in and maybe some of you suffer from that. It can result in lethargy, sleep disruption, cognitive problems, irritability, and in some cases, clinical depression. And according to the National Institute of Mental Health, uh, seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, SAD, affects about 5% of the US population. And the further north you go, the further away from the equator you go, the more of a prevalence there is to SAD. That's very different than the quote unquote winter blues. The winter blues are lousy, but they're not as serious a situation. You can't really diagnose the winter blues. You can diagnose SAD, and fortunately, there are treatments for SAD. There are there's full spectrum light therapy. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these light boxes. They're not expensive in a relative sense. They come in various sizes. But if you tend to feel down when it's dark a lot or in the winter time, when SAD is most prevalent, you might want to look into uh, getting a light box. There's also psychotherapy, which can be very effective, and in some cases, medication. And vitamin D supplementation can help a lot as well. I have a doctor who says the only vitamin that's really worth anything is vitamin D because it really has documented effects on our mood. Other weather phenomena that can affect our mood is persistent wind. Especially, if you're walking around on a really windy day and you're walking against the wind, that can really get to you just psychologically. It's putting up a barrier to your forward progress in a very real way. You can also have those high wind situations associated with winter storms. If any of you have been in hurricanes, or if you can watch any programs about hurricanes, one of the uh, one of the things about hurricanes that can drive you nuts is the wind. It's not just the force of the wind, but it's the sound of the wind that can really get to you. Also, there are what we call named wind systems, like the Santa Anas in California, the Chinooks in the Rockies, the Mistrals in France. Those are winds that can last a long time when they get going, and they can also produce stress and irritability and anxiety. Storm anxiety is a very real thing. It can be the result of experience that you might have had, kind of weather-related trauma associated with severe weather events like tornadoes or hurricanes or floods or even thunderstorms. And more on that in the next section. Heat and high humidity can cause, I know that personally, can cause anxiety and irritability, and can also disrupt your sleep patterns. According to the American Psychological Association, there's a spike in mental health related emergency room visits during heat waves. That's a real thing. And extreme cold can impact your mental health by isolating people indoors. Of course, we all know from the COVID years what isolation can do psychologically as well. On the other side of the spectrum, I'll say that rainbows can induce intense happiness. That's kind of a nice thing. The sound of gentle rain on a roof can be soothing and improve sleep. And then there's what I call the UVM effect. I told you I went to the University of Vermont as an undergraduate. When I was checking out colleges, I went up to Burlington, which is where UVM is. And I noticed that students, whether they were alone or walking with other people, were walking down the street and smiling. Everybody was smiling. And I thought to myself, wow, if everybody smiles at this university, it must be a great university. Well, it is a great university, but I found out later that's not why people were smiling. That was the first day in a month that the sun was out. So Burlington is, I believe, the second cloudiest city in the U.S. So that shows you how important sunlight can be in terms of our mood. So what I've been saying up to now in the last few minutes, it represents the psychological impacts of weather. But I want to go a little bit into the psychological impacts of weather predictions and planning associated with that. So how do you feel when your plans are threatened by forecasts of bad weather, even a week in advance? My brother is somebody who, let's say he was scheduling a pool party for a week hence, something that I know I'd be looking forward to. And the 7-day forecast said it looks like rain is likely a week from now. Well, he would say, well, it's canceled. We're not going to have that pool party because of the weather forecast. And that's how he reacts to a 7-day forecast. What I tell him is, things might change between now and then. That's the way I look at it. Everybody looks at those kinds of things differently. Another thing I want to talk about is forecast errors. And there's type 1 and type 2 errors. In weather, a type 1 error is when there's a forecast of an event or a storm, but that event does not materialize. A type 2 error is when there is no forecast or advance warning of an event that actually does occur. So the question is, what is the psychology of the forecaster in dealing with those kinds of errors? For me personally, type 1. I take type 1 if I was going to have to choose between these two types of errors, because I'd rather be over-prepared. I'd rather tell you that something possibly dangerous is going to happen and it doesn't. I'm going to be very upset if that occurs, but I'm going to be pleased that at least you hopefully were prepared for it. Whereas if I didn't say a big storm was coming and then it hit, I think there would be a lot worse consequences than that. So I'd love to know, you might think for yourself, what would you rather have? What type of error would you rather have? Something that is forecast to happen that doesn't, or something that isn't forecast to happen that does? So something to think about. And municipalities plan on the basis of weather predictions. And these type 1 and 2 errors come into play. But the really fascinating thing is that for many major East Coast winter storms, decisions are made to close schools, for example, before the storm that we're discussing even exists. So computer models and meteorologists know that certain conditions that might be coming west to east across the country are going to result in a low pressure or storm system forming off the mid-Atlantic coast and then moving up the East Coast. So a lot of decisions are made before that storm even exists. The great thing about that is it's a testament to the increasing confidence in the veracity of such forecasts. But the stakes are high. There are consequences of what we call busted forecasts. If schools have closed because we said a storm was coming and it doesn't come, that's a real problem. And you have to face the music as a forecaster. You may have made 99 perfect forecasts in a row, but if you blow the 100th one, nobody's going to remember the prior 99. That's just human nature. That's the cost of doing business. There's also the psychology of being a forecaster. If you don't agree with the prevailing thought about what the upcoming weather is, you might be surprised to know that in TV stations, there are monitors up with the other TV stations where the meteorologist looks up and knows what the other folks are going for. And so they want to know if they're sort of in the ballpark of what everybody else is doing. But sometimes you may have a feeling about something that is that's more extreme than what everybody else is saying. This actually came into play in 1978 in the blizzard of 78 in New England. Most of the TV forecasters were going for a big storm, maybe a foot of snow. But a young forecaster named Harvey Leonard felt like there could be 2 feet or more of snow. And he had the guts to go out on a limb and say that was what was going to happen. And he turned out to be the only one who was correct about that particular storm. Not a bad way to start your career. But again, it's psychology. What are you going to do in those different situations? The next thing on our list here, I call primal, which basically is survival. You know, we're not talking now about rain showers and partly cloudy and drizzle and maybe a snowstorm, you know, a regular snowstorm, that kind of thing. But talking about really hazardous weather that tends to produce casualties and sometimes fatalities. So I do want to go to this slide, and you'll recognize these hazards: tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, lightning, snowstorms and blizzards, and heat. These numbers on the left that are in parentheses is the average number of fatalities associated with these phenomena in the United States. The caveat here is that for things like tornadoes especially, but also hurricanes and some of the other ones, they're all over the place. There could be 5 fatalities this year and 170, 150 next year and 20 the next year. But these are just averages over a long period of time. And what might surprise you is what I've got highlighted there, which is heat. Heat is responsible for something like 3/4 of the average fatalities in the US. And that's hard to believe because heat isn't a dramatic event like a tornado or something like that. It's not going to destroy a town, if you will. It just kind of settles in and can become very deadly. Right now in Europe, that is what they're facing. You might have heard about it in the news. Very serious heat wave going on there. We're going to be hot in the United States moving into the July 4th holiday. I have friends in Arizona. It's 100 to 105 degrees out there. And what's interesting, if you look at some of the temperatures in Europe, where we have a terrible heat wave going on and 105 in Arizona, we don't consider the temperatures in Arizona to be out of the realm of possibility in June. But in Europe, it's a whole different, the same temperature results in a much more hazardous condition. And one of the reasons for that is Europe, especially Northern Europe, is used to being cool, even relatively cool during the summer. You don't have a lot of people with air conditioning. So they're not equipped to deal with this kind of a heat wave. Also, the heat index, which takes into account humidity, and by the way, that's the only temperature that matters. When you listen to the weather forecast, always find out what the heat index temperature is going to be, because that's the effect on your body. So in Europe, heat indexes for the same temperature tend to be a lot higher. So that's another reason. I can't remember when it was. It might have been 20 years ago. There was a terrible heat wave in the Pacific Northwest that killed a lot of people. And one of the reasons for that, people don't have air conditioning in the Pacific Northwest. Well, now they might because of that. They don't need it in general. The Pacific Northwest is rainy and cool a lot. So that comes into play as well. Let's see. So according to the United Nations, over 90% of major disasters, major natural disasters, are weather and climate related. And what do I mean when I say a disaster? A disaster is when a natural event, say a tornado, intersects with civilization. So let's say in the United States, in the middle of the US, 400, 500 years ago, there was a horrendous tornado, an F5, which is the most powerful tornado. Well, 500 years ago, it might have disturbed some prairie dogs or ripped up some grass or whatever, but it wouldn't have been a disaster because there weren't any people out there. But the more people there are, the more concentration of people that you have, the greater the probability that some of these natural events are going to plow right through the middle of them and that's when you get your high casualty types of events. Um, we've had a lot of population shift to Florida, and that's over 20, 30, 40 years. That's put a lot of people at greater risk of hurricanes. And these, by definition, these are rare events. So in general, most of us don't think about the possibility of them happening to us. We don't worry about them. And we don't have to worry about them until we do. And at that point, it might be too late. So it's very important to be prepared. Back to psychology, uh, take a look at documentaries about weather disasters. I'm going to give you one in particular. You can go to YouTube and see a lot of these. Uh, there was a horrendous tornado, one of the worst ever in Joplin, Missouri in 2011. And if you look at that documentary, they start out by saying, April 22nd, 2011, it started like every other day in Joplin, Missouri. People were heading out to work and kids were going to school and people were, friends were getting together for coffee and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And that's the problem. Things can change very quickly and you can be blissfully unaware and tragically underprepared in situations like this. Another psychological problem is the cry wolf syndrome, where you've heard over and over again that there may be the possibility of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. And a lot of times you've heard this warning and nothing's happened. So why should you continue to believe it? Unfortunately, sometimes it does happen. So the cry wolf syndrome is understandable, but it's a problem. Also, there's the experience level that you may or may not have had with certain kinds of storms, like hurricanes. If you move to Florida from Nebraska, you've never experienced a hurricane. So you don't know what that's going to be like. Or maybe you think it's not going to be so bad. Or you've experienced a hurricane, but it was a weaker hurricane than the one that's coming now. So you may think to yourself, oh, I went through a hurricane, it's no big deal. But that was that hurricane, and this hurricane might be different. So that's another psychological aspect. And then there's a lack of knowledge about watches and warnings and advisories, and also a lot of warnings that you hear are based on counties. Until recently, I never knew what county I lived in. Do you know what county you live in? It's kind of important. Find out what your county is. Now, more and more, they're starting to list cities in warnings, which is great, but you should know what county you're in. Also, what to do, where to go in case of a severe weather event. Again, there's so many, I could be here for hours. There's so many great things to talk about. Let's see. So perfect forecast, this is an important point. Perfect forecasts mean nothing unless the response to those forecasts is both timely and effective. Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, great example of that, because the forecasts for that were excellent for a week ahead of time. So when there was an abject disaster as a result of that, you couldn't blame it on the forecast. There were a lot of other reasons to blame that we can't get into right now. So this is where the notion of combining psychology and social science and meteorology has come to light, and it's an emerging field, and I think it's very exciting. And then finally, I want to talk about here we go, people. The world's very divided and polarized right now, and more than usual, I would say. And weather's one of the very few things that all 8 billion people on the planet have in common. It doesn't matter where they live or what their situations are. Nobody's agnostic about the weather. Everyone agrees that weather exists, without exception. So what else do 8 billion people agree on? I don't think many things, if any, other than that there's weather and that it affects them. So as such, it's one of the few things that can bring people and nations together. If there's dialogue about nothing else, it can be about weather and climate. And powerful weather computers and that kind of thing that really, and forecasters really rely on data being shared around the world, even with countries that are in conflict with each other. Routinely, every day, there's weather data that's shared among 139 different countries. So again, weather can be a way to bring people together. If we can't cooperate about a lot of things, we can, must, and do cooperate when it comes to the weather. I know I'm watching the clock here, and we're a little bit later than I wanted to be, but I'll just say one more thing here about people, and that is that weather's a great thing to bring up in social situations that might otherwise be awkward. Two people who've never met, maybe they're in an elevator or something, and it's awkwardly quiet. You know, you can go up to somebody and say, "Well, geez, it seems like it's never going to stop snowing," or "Can you believe how hot it's been?" And everybody, you know, that's a conversation starter, an icebreaker. So everybody talks about the weather and can relate to it. So I want a summary here, the takeaways. Weather affects many aspects of our lives, for better or for worse, sometimes in ways that aren't obvious. I hope I've illuminated some of those. And combining social science and meteorology offers a real exciting opportunity to improve forecasts and warnings and the response to them, which has the potential to save a lot of lives. And then also weather can bring people, communities, regions, and nations together in ways that few other things can. I don't want to suggest as a result of this webinar that you should think about the weather all the time. I'll leave that to weather geeks like me. But hopefully you'll be a little more aware of the many, many ways that weather's entwined with your life. And again, look up. I want to leave you with this quote here. This lyric is from a song, a rock group called Crowded House. Everywhere you go, always take the weather with you. And I added this, or the weather will take you with it. That's not a threat, by the way. I don't mean that a tornado is going to take you away, but weather's going to be with you one way or the other. And that's a very happy thing. With that, I want to thank all of you for bearing with my weather obsession. And in a second, I'm going to turn this over to Sandy to run the Q&A. But one thing before I do, and that is that you're going to be getting a survey to fill out about the program. And on the survey, there's going to be a space to ask Ken, the weather guy, a weather question. And all those questions are going to come into me. If we have enough questions, then there'll be another weather webinar at which I will spend the whole webinar answering your questions. So please do ask me any weather question you want. I look forward to hearing from you about that.
Thank you, Ken. Oops, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, great. This is Sandy again. I just want to thank everyone also for coming, and for you, Ken, for a great presentation and providing us with knowledge about the weather and its impact on our lives. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed learning with us. AARP is a nationwide nonprofit that helps people 50 and older live the life they choose. As a member, you help support AARP's important national and local efforts, like protecting Social Security, helping people avoid fraud, and lowering prescription drug costs. Membership can also bring savings on things like dining, travel, and gas, which matters more than ever with today's soaring prices. Please check aarp.org/NH regularly for more virtual and in-person programs offered by AARP New Hampshire. Be well and take care.
And Ken, this is Frances, and we did have some
Frances.
questions.
Sure.
So a lot of the questions that were asked, you answered. But somebody asked, what's a weather app that you would recommend?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I use the weather app that comes along with your phone, and that might be actually. I'm not sure if it goes if it's on Androids as well as Apples. I have an Apple, and there is a proviso on this, and that is you'll note in a lot of the weather apps there was a great one called Gray Sky, I think, and unfortunately that was sold. That was a really good one, the kind of weather app you want has periodic, every 3 hours or so, weather temperature, rainfall, that kind of a thing, pollution index, etc. Um, and uh, what you want to be careful of is a lot of these have hourly. You can go hour to hour to hour, and they're going to have a temperature and an amount of rain and all of that at 7 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock. First of all, I don't think many of us need to know down to that level of resolution what is going to be at 8 o'clock versus 9 o'clock. But also, I don't think that we, as in the weather business, are that accurate when it comes down to that kind of a time interval. What you want to look at is the tendency over a period of hours. Is temperature going down? Is it going up? That kind of a thing. So there's a lot of weather apps out there, and I really haven't found a bad one.
Because some people said, like WeatherBug or AccuWeather
Yeah,
did you think?
AccuWeather is excellent. I haven't used WeatherBug a lot. AccuWeather is very good. AccuWeather actually started at Penn State, uh, where I went to graduate school. They're very good.
And someone asked, is it true that barometric pressure affects women and can cause them to go into labor?
I don't know the answer to that. I think, there might be some validity to that in the sense if the pressure gets very low, in the same way that migraines can be aggravated, that the sort of the impediment to birth is being lifted a little bit by less weight, on the mom. So conceivably that could be true. I'd like to find out if there's any factual basis to that, but I wouldn't rule it out.
And someone else asked, have you ever been able to go to the top of Mount Washington to experience the weather that they have?
I have. There is a weather station at the top of Mount Washington. I visited there. The meteorologists and weather observers have 6 month shifts up there. I wasn't up there during some of the most extreme weather. The strongest wind ever recorded, something like at the ground, something like, I don't know, 240 miles an hour, something like that, was recorded at the top of Mount Washington. And also the temperatures, can be, 100, 120, 140 below zero with the wind chill effect, that kind of a thing. It is one of the most dangerous mountains in the country. You wouldn't think so, but that's because the weather can change so rapidly up there, and people often are not prepared in the way they dress to go to climb to the top of Mount Washington. They think that the conditions in the parking lot are going to be the same as they are, 6,000 feet higher, and that's just not true. So you've got to be careful of that as well. So I've been to the top of Mount Washington, but not during bad weather.
I've been to the top of Mount Washington too, a couple of times, and definitely not during bad weather. I'm a warm weather person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a really kind of question here. So what are the meteorological physics behind ABQ area windy season that runs from February to early May?
ABQ?
That's what it says.
I don't know if that's, I don't know if that means
Maybe it's
Albuquerque or I'm
that's
not.
what I thought it meant, but
Uh, I'm going to have to look into that. You know what I'd ask that person to do is, and if you're listening, on the survey that you get, make that a question that you ask on the survey, and clarify what you mean by ABQ, and I'll be happy to answer that for you. I think that's the best way to handle that.
and let's see. So as a meteorologist, do you trust 10-day forecasts?
I'm so glad somebody asked that question. You have a lot of TV stations that boast that they have 10-day weather forecasts, and I don't believe in going that far out. And one of the things you have to know about the weather, the TV stations that do give you a 10-day forecast is none of them ever say at day 7, 8, and 9, by the way, 8 days ago, this is what we said the weather would be today. They don't do that. So they're not holding themselves accountable for giving a forecast that far out in advance. And to me, that's not right. I think that 7 days under certain circumstances, you can start to get an idea, and that in general, unless you're talking about very localized things like thunderstorms or the specific amount of snowfall that's going to take place at a certain location, that at 3 to 4 days out, you can pretty much take it to the bank. Now, I totally would have faith in that. Whereas when I was a kid, maybe that would have been 2 days ahead. Now it's 4 days ahead, and people might say, well, gee, whatever, 2, 4, that's not a big improvement. That is an enormous improvement. So the answer to the question is, I don't put much stock into 10 days ahead. I just don't.
All right. You've got a lot of questions, so you really need to do several more sessions of these. So
Well,
here's
yeah, please. I want to see those questions. So please put
All
them
right.
on your surveys.
So on-air meteorologists don't often discern the difference between relative humidity and dew point temps, and they think it should be important and wondering why they don't.
You're starting to see, at least I am, in this area in New England, weather forecasters now putting up what the dew points are. The dew point is actually the amount of moisture there is in the atmosphere, as opposed to the percentage of moisture that is being held by the atmosphere, and that's relative humidity. Dew point is much more informative, and the difference between the air temperature and the dew point temperature tells you a lot about how sticky and humid it is. The less of a difference there is, the more icky and humid it is. So, for example, if the temperature is 72 and the dew point is 70, that's a 2-degree difference. We say that the dew point depression is 2. That is stiflingly humid. Whereas if the temperature is 72 and the dew point is 46, that is very, very dry. And what it really means is that if it's 72 and the dew point is 46, you have to cool the atmosphere down all the way to 46 degrees to have all the moisture in the atmosphere condense into clouds. It's a long way to go. But if you have a dew point depression of just 2, it's really, really humid.
All right, we have one other question. So this is kind of a thought for you. So what opportunities and responsibilities do you feel meteorologists have to inform and persuade governments and organizations have with respect to being knowledgeable and proactive in the areas of global warming, air and water qualities with focus on protecting our environment and our people?
Could you just, the very first part of that question, how much
Okay,
responsibility?
Yeah, it says, so what opportunities and responsibilities do you feel that meteorologists have to inform and persuade governments and organizations to inform and be knowledgeable and proactive concerning things like global warming, air and water qualities, and that type of thing? Do you think they
I
have
think
a responsibility?
the answer is all the responsibility, I can't talk, all the responsibility in the world is on our shoulders to do exactly that. The impediment that we have is that there's a portion of the public that thinks that global warming is, to use the word I hear a lot, is a hoax, and that we don't need to worry about it. Al Gore in 2000 used the term inconvenient truth. It is very inconvenient to admit that we do have a problem and that we have to cut back on fossil fuels and all those things, which things that we have to do. But when you can't agree on the fact, even among scientists, that we really do have a problem with global warming, it's very difficult to get anything done. And also, I'll say that when you get rid of meteorologists and climate scientists and all of that, in some supposed effort to save money, uh, I think that's outrageous, and it's penny wise and pound foolish. We need as many meteorologists and climate scientists as possible to deal with this problem.
All right, so there have been a lot of questions and our time is getting about up. So like you said, we would ask that you, when you get your surveys, that you actually put your questions in there, and it will give Ken a good idea of something else to talk to us about. And I know you said you got at least one more coming up, so you could be doing more than these. So we would like to thank everybody for coming today and listening to this, like they said, on a Friday afternoon. All right. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks,
You-
everybody.
Everybody saying they love your presentation. They love all your excellent answers, and they're so happy to do this. So they
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed this presentation.
Great.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ken. It was a wonderful
And
presentation.
thanks to all of you for putting this presentation on.